and welcome inside this week opening edition of Big Ten Today. I'm your host, Rick Pizzo. Promise I won't be solo for long. Dave Wanstead will be here shortly. Some really interesting and cool coaching perspective on what the days leading up to the NFL draft are like. We'll take you inside a team war room, the discussion between coaches, GMs, and scouts about which players to take when you're on the clock. We also head out west to L.A., our first exclusive interview with new USC Hoops head coach Eric Musselman. All that to come a little bit later in the show, but we begin with the big story, and there are so many stories this spring in Ann Arbor. Defending champs? Yes. J.J. McCarthy? No. So who will be the new QB? What will year one with Sharon Moore as the full-time head coach be like? And how about all the changes on defense? So much to ponder as Michigan looks to defend its Big Ten and national championships. For much more on the spring game and all the Michigan storylines, we welcome in Sam Webb, Michigan insider with 24/7 Sports. Sam, everybody wants to talk about the quarterback. We understand why. In college football, it is the difference-making position. So what do we see right now, and what did we see on Saturday in the race to be the man who replaces J.J. McCarthy?
You know, Rick, glad to be with you, man. Long time that it's been since I've been on Big Ten Network. So glad to be here to talk about what is an ongoing competition. I think that's what you take away, is that it's still a race, to use what you said in the intro there. A lot of folks thought that this would be Alex Orji for sure, and I think Davis Warren showed in the game on Saturday what was the case for a number of practices this spring where he shined the brightest. Now, there were other practices where it was Orji who was shining the brightest, and he's the guy that maybe fans are most familiar with because he was on the field last year, mostly in a running capacity. He's really made some strides throwing the football, but Davis Warren was super crisp. I mean, he's 6 for 9 passing, I think for about 136 yards. But what was most notable to me, Rick, was 4 of those passes came with pressure in his face, including his big touchdown pass to Fred Moore, where he eludes pressure, drifts to his right, throws back to his left across the middle in stride that allowed Fred Moore to catch and run. It shows that this is a battle that will go into the summer for those guys as they work on their own, and then into the fall where we can see which guy can do it the most consistently, especially as you also interject into the equation and Jack Tuttle, who has some Big Ten starts under his belt. So it's still a race. I think that's the big takeaway.
Yeah, Davis Warren averaging about 23 yards per completion. If there was one knock on the Michigan offense, and JJ last year, was that everything was short over the middle. Certainly like to take the top off when you can. You also have a running back that you can use both carrying the football and a terrific pass catcher out of the backfield. A lot of folks were shocked when Donovan Edwards announced that he would be back. So what's the ceiling for Edwards this year if the guys around him play to their ability as well?
Yeah, he's a special talent, man. And I wasn't surprised given what his goal was last year. I talked to him a lot last summer, and he anticipated having the kind of season that would allow him to go to the pros. And it just didn't work out that way. He had a surgery during last offseason that kind of limited him in practice. And it was just a bumpier start to the season, I think, in part due to that. But he really came on, and by the end of the year, and you saw it in the national championship game, he has that special game-breaking talent. And I think his biggest evolution was in mentality. Like, if you know, I've known Donovan since he was a sophomore in high school. He is a home run hitter. And was one of the things you see with home run hitters, Rick, is they try to hit the home run all the time. And I think that was Donovan. I think as he has gotten deeper into his career, and you saw it in the national championship game, he tries to stay within the framework of the play. That first touchdown in that championship game, it was an open zone where he runs into the back of his blocker because he is trying to press that A gap. He is trying to stay within the framework of the play, but an explosive came out of that. And I think you're seeing more of that maturity as a runner from him now. You throw into it his ability to catch it out of the backfield, his ability to really show vision and patience. He is poised to have an outstanding season. And I think he's the kind of guy that if he has the year that he's expecting to have, people look at him the way they looked at Jahmyr Gibbs a couple years ago.
It was a small sample size on Saturday, but even in those 5 carries, showing a lot of patience, waiting for his blockers, waiting for those holes to open up. Any other offensive players, Sam, that either stood out to you Saturday or that have stood out during the course of spring ball that may be new names to folks, even those who follow Michigan football?
Yeah, so Fred Moore would be the obvious one because he had the biggest splash play of the day. He also caught a corner route earlier in the game. I believe that was from Jaden Denegal. So when you talk to the coaches and players about who's the guy most equipped to take the top off the defense, is Fred Moore. So he is the name to really watch. Marlon Klein at tight end. He led the game in receptions, and he's a guy who's flashed all spring. We knew he was a pass catcher, but his ability as an inline blocker, I think, has been a bit of a revelation. I'm not saying that he's arrived or he's going to be AJ Barner from last year, but I think he's he's farther down that line than maybe a lot of folks expected him to be heading into the spring. So I thought that was really impressive. Not just him catching the ball. Very first run for Donovan Edwards. He comes off the line on a double team with Andrew Gentry, gets to the second level and gets the linebacker, and that helps spring the play. So that was a really big one for Marlon Klein. And then a name that the other touchdown reception for Davis Warren was to Kendrick Bell, Ronnie Bell's little brother, and he came out of the contest saying, "I don't want people to call me Ronnie's little brother. I want them to call me Kendrick. You catch touchdown passes, they'll call you Kendrick." And so we're calling Kendrick Bell today, and that's a guy I think they're really looking to maybe be another weapon for them as the season unfolds.
Hey, you keep catching touchdown passes, they'll call you pretty much anything you want. Let's go to the other side of the ball. The great news, when you have awesome defensive coordinators, you usually have great defenses. That's been the case for Michigan. The bad news, that means those defensive coordinators often move on to new opportunities. In comes Wink Martindale, a guy, Sam, with vast experience and a reputation as a really aggressive play caller. What do you think that means for the defense that we'll see on the field in 2024?
Yeah, man, it's a great question, Rick. I think Michigan fans are a little nervous about it because his aggression is on a different level than his understudies. And you got to remember, when Mike McDonald and Jesse Minter are understudies of Wink Martindale, he came in the door saying, "I'm the guru of this defense." I mean, there's not got to be any drop off, right? But there is going to be a difference. I mean, every guy has their own spin on it. And his spin is ultra aggression, but he has the luxury of not really needing to be that aggressive to get pressure. You got the best defensive line in the country. You added Jayshawn Barham, who's like a chess piece, who comes over from Maryland. You could bring him off the edge. We saw him, blitzing up the middle in the game. So you have the ability to really accentuate pressure. The question is going to be how do you balance it for a team who I think was a defense that really stood out because of his versatility and how multiple it was on the back end with his coverages. Yes, he was aggressive in the game Saturday. What stuck out more to me than his aggression was the amount of man defense he played behind it. I don't know that he really showed what they're going to do. I think if you watch his career, you watch him with Baltimore, you watch him with the Giants, you think it's going to be a heavy sort of preponderance of man coverage. But this is a really smart defense with some veteran guys on the back end that allow you to play a lot of different coverages. And I would be surprised if we don't see him mix it up like we saw Jesse Minter mix it up some last year, but maybe with a little more aggression and a little more man defense in there. But Wink's going to be Wink, to your point, Rick. He is going to be ultra aggressive.
So which of those veterans, especially those on the back end, will be the leaders of the defense to bring along the young guys that fill so many holes, not just last year, Sam, but the last couple of years? How many guys have moved on to the NFL? And among those young guys, who do you think has the biggest upside?
Man, you're out here about the Wally Pip Dave Revson with these questions, man. You're on a roll here, Rick. I'm just saying, man. I think part of what makes them special is not just the talent, but the culture. So who's going to lead them? Their stars lead by performance and by example. Will Johnson, absolute star, MVP, defensive MVP of the national championship game. And he, I think, has taken a lot of those guys in the secondary under his wing. When they weren't in practice, they were at his workouts. You look up front, Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, these are two guys who are elite. They are going to be first-round draft picks. And then you complement them with Derek Moore and Josiah Stewart, guys who played a lot of snaps last year, made a lot of plays, but were behind some seniors, and now they're ready to lead as well. So what you see, or what I see, is these guys all kind of teaching the youngsters that are expecting to step up that the expectation is for the position, and that with that comes an expectation for how you're going to prepare. Like, they have, one of the things that stands out to me over the course of the spring was that the older guys at one point kind of took the young guys, this is after a practice, they took the young guys to the side and said, listen, there is a way that you prepare to be a champion. None of these guys experienced the downside, the downturn before Michigan won Big Ten titles. When they were 2-4 and when they were losing to Ohio State, there's a preparation, a level of preparation that comes with that. And I think that was, as much as anything else, about teaching them about scheme and coverages and blitzes. It was culture and how to prepare. And those veteran guys, I think, on defense especially, have done a really good job of ingraining that in young guys that are expected to step up. Guys like Jair Hill, who was good in the game. DJ Waller, who was good in the game. Zeke Berry, a young safety who was good in the game. All these young guys have been getting heavy doses of this is how you prepare to be a champion. And that was ringing through to me in the game as well.
You bring up the word expectations. They never change in Ann Arbor, no matter who is wearing the head whistle. And this year it's Sharon Moore. I know he had a taste of being a head coach last year, but you and I both know it's entirely different when you have an entire year and when you are the man. Have there been any changes in approach or mentality from Sharon this spring in comparison to when he was just in quotes, the OC?
Yeah, man, it's so I wouldn't say that the change or the difference is evident in anything you see on the field. I think they're culturally the same. They're philosophically the same. Might there be some tweaks to their approach? I think that's mostly due to personnel, though. Their DNA is as a physical smash mouth running offense. I think you've already got a glimpse of who Sharon is as a coach. Last year, it was really important, I think, in the evaluation process for Ward Manuel to see him in those crunch time games at the end of the season. And the game that Ward keeps referencing, he did it again on Saturday to a group of donors. It's that Penn State game, Rick, where they run it like 32 times in a row or whatever it was. I think back to the Washington game back in 2021, where they were in a game where your quarterback couldn't complete a pass. For whatever reason, he just wasn't on that day, and they ran it down Washington's throat. Now, they couldn't throw a pass against Penn State for a different reason. They couldn't block them against Penn State. And so Sharon, kind of drawing on that experience from 2 years ago when he was a co-OC, kind of applying it in a different scenario and saying, listen, it's not about your plan. You got hit in the mouth. How are you going to react? Well, we got to throw our game plan out of the window and go with something that's going to work. And that is running the rock because they can't stop it. That's what I think he is as a coach. Yeah, I got a plan of who we are and how we are going to win games. But if I have to adapt on the fly, I can do it. Culturally, we're going to be physical. Culturally, we're going to be accountable. Culturally, we're going to be together. He is very much an embodiment of everything they were leading up to the championship. And I think that's a big reason why he got hired. I think that's a big reason why these guys have really bought in out the gate to what he's bringing to the table.
The more things change, the more they stay the same. I love the fact that Sam brings up that 21 game against Washington. Of course, the quarterback for Michigan back then, Cade McNamara, who will now be playing with Iowa this year. Washington will now be a member of the Big Ten. All things we could have predicted 2.5 years ago. Sam Webb, Michigan insider for 24/7. Great info. Awesome to catch up. Enjoyed it, my friend.
All right. Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it.
We are excited to welcome one of the league's newest coaches to the show, Eric Musselman, joining us next as the USC Hoops head man gets set to lead the Trojans into a brand new Big Ten era. When I say that Eric Musselman has won everywhere, I truly mean everywhere. NCAA, NBA, CBA, USBL, D-League, internationally, maybe the only coach ever to be named Coach of the Year, not just 3 times, but in 3 completely different leagues. And now the league that he is set to join with USC, the Big Ten, that begins officially in August. And we are very excited to welcome Eric Musselman onto the Big Ten Today stage for the first time. Coach, first and foremost, great to have you with us. And I know that you've done this before, but I'm imagining it doesn't get any less crazy when you change jobs, try to settle in, figure out your staff and roster. What's your life been like the last couple of weeks?
It's been crazy, Rick, as you can only imagine. And obviously super excited to be at USC and be back in Los Angeles. This is the third time that I've lived in LA. So looking forward to the challenges ahead, and obviously going into the Big Ten certainly presents a lot of challenges as well. So just trying to put our roster together as quickly as possible with the way the portal's set up. It would be a crazy time for anybody, let alone when you're a new coach going into a new league as well.
Everything seems to be more fluid now than maybe it's ever been in college basketball. So for you, why was this job with the Trojans the right job at the right time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, with any of us, job-wise, it always, you have the job aspect of it, you have the personal aspect, and then you have the family aspect. So all three aligned perfectly for myself, my family, and then I hope for the school as well. But we're really excited. I think that the brand of USC, the brand of the Big Ten, all those things make it a great spot for us to be at right now. And we're super excited.
You mentioned a few of the things that you've already tasked yourself with since getting this job. What's the number one thing that has to happen before you start to feel settled in the new position?
Having 13 players, having a group of guys that the roster's settled, and then certainly it gets, you get into your 8 weeks where you're able to work with the guys in the summertime. But right now it's trying to get the staff assembled, get the player, the roster, working with roster management's probably the number one priority. Staff would be number 2 right now. And then eventually it's going to come down to family moving from Fayetteville, Arkansas. And then there's that whole aspect of it, getting my daughter situated, going into a new high school. So all those things are kind of coming after our roster management. But we are looking for a strength coach and another assistant coaching spot to fill and basketball ops. And so we still have a lot of work to do, but right now the roster just, it's very difficult to win in any sport without great players. And that's what we're really focused on right now.
It's so true. I talked with Danny Sprinkle from Washington last week. He said something very similar. Everybody thinks this is a glorious job. I'm sleeping in a hotel. I haven't even found the local coffee shop yet. That comes 3rd, 4th, and 5th after everything else. So let's go to the first thing that you talked about, and that is filling your roster. You've obviously done a great job in the portal. You've received a couple of commitments already. What is your philosophy on managing and balancing that quote-unquote traditional recruiting philosophy of going after high school kids against the newer philosophy of being able to get guys who can come in and be ready to play with college experience already under their belts?
Yeah, I think, for us, the success has been doing both. I look back at our team a year ago with 4 guys playing in the NBA. We had 3 high school guys, a lottery pick in Anthony Black, Nick Smith, the 1st-round draft pick, Jordan Walsh, the 2nd-round pick by Boston, and then Ricky Council, an undrafted player who was a transfer, who's now playing for the 76ers. So I think you've got to have a good blend. Certainly the success of incoming freshmen who can be one and dones. I look at the run we made to an Elite 8 with Moses Moody who led us in scoring and led us in minutes played as a freshman. So I think you've got to have a good blend. Certainly the transfer portal for all sports. Transfers give, can give leadership. Transfers give obviously experience and guys that have played in big games. But yeah, in our opinion, you've got to have a blend. I think it's really hard sometimes in your first year to hit the high school market just because so many players are committed. But certainly, I think you got to have a blend. And when you can get incoming freshmen that have NBA level talent, whether it be first year, like some of the guys I've mentioned, or second year guys that come in as freshmen, like Jalen Williams, who's playing with Oklahoma City, I think all that stuff becomes super, super important. So moving forward, we want to hit the high school recruiting as hard as we can and try to find guys that we've identified that can turn into NBA players. And then in the transfer portal, guys that can help immediately.
Eric, your style has been really fun to watch, whether it's on the international stage, in college basketball. Your teams could always score. Your Arkansas team last year, final 8 games of the year, is a small sample size, average 86 per game. How much do you hope to bring that style and push the pace in LA?
No, we certainly want to, play a cosmetically pleasing style from an offensive standpoint. I do believe it always, comes down to what your personnel is and trying to figure out the strength of your roster and then what that looks like to try to help win games and also develop players throughout the course of the season. I think that, we've always tried to pride ourselves having our program play as good a basketball as we can towards the end of the year. And certainly want to be a team that improves throughout the course of the season, especially in year one. But I do feel creating an identity. We've tried to recruit players thus far that can give us an identity in year one of playing super hard. And then the defensive side of the ball, especially in the Big Ten, you've always got to have great defense to advance either in conference tournaments or maybe most importantly, in our opinion, in the NCAA tournament. So it's got to be a good blend offensively and defensively, but certainly would like to continue the offensive philosophy that we've had, the last 5 years at Arkansas, as well as the 4 years at Nevada when we did have some really good offensive teams that could score the ball and space the floor as well.
As you just mentioned, you have seen the Big Ten from the opposition's perspective over the last couple of years. So from that perspective, how does it compare and contrast to other leagues you've coached in?
Well, certainly I think that as you look at the landscape of at least college basketball, the Big Ten and the SEC, and it's probably all sports. I mean, those are 2 premier conferences. The coaching in the Big Ten for basketball is incredible. Every night you're going to get up against a legendary coach, Hall of Fame type coaches, or you're going against some great younger up and coming coaches that have great upside in their careers moving forward. So a lot of challenges. And then certainly, I've tried to study even, going into as a road team to the Big Ten venues and understand, what those crowds are going to be like. And I know in a lot of Big Ten cities that it's not just game day that they're looking forward to a basketball game. They look forward to the 2 to 3 days leading up to a home game in a lot of Big Ten venues. So super challenging for sure to win a home game in this league as well as to win a road game. But I've tried to spend a lot of time studying Big Ten coaches that have been at their current jobs and try to look at what happens after timeouts, offensively, defensively, what they do in late game situations. I have a lot to learn. Certainly in the SEC, I felt very comfortable with a lot of the coaches on what might be coming after timeouts, what the late game play packages were offensively. So we got a lot of work to do this summer in preparation before we get to league play. And once the roster's done, we'll dive into more analysis of some of the coaching philosophies that happen in this league.
You're right. The Big Ten fans are usually ready 2 or 3 days before, but you spend some bad winters in Minneapolis and Champaign. They may be 2 or 3 days before games out in LA when their team is going to visit you to get a little bit of sun after spending that kind of time in the winter. Eric, I want to finish here. You've already touched on some of the challenges in terms of the coaches you'll go against and the players and the quality of the opposition. Outside of on the court, what do you foresee as being the biggest challenges as you enter a league that now does, in fact, stretch basically from coast to coast?
Yeah, I think, Rick, it's what is your recruiting philosophy going to be? Are you going to just recruit as if I'm going to use USC as an example. Are you just going to recruit the West Coast? As if you were in the Pac-10 or Pac-12, or are you going to expand your recruiting base now, knowing that that a potential player could be playing, in Michigan, in Ohio, for several different games? So I think that philosophy is something that our staff will discuss. Certainly, we're going to have to recruit the Los Angeles market. We're going to have to recruit California. And then how much do we expand outside of that area? And it might be a little bit of trial by error as well. I know that, when we got the job at Arkansas, we weren't really sure. Dallas became a great market for us at Arkansas. We did not know that necessarily going in. So we're going to learn on the job. I mean, that's part of what happens in year one and year two with many coaches that are new to a program or new to an area. I do feel that much of our recruiting base that we had, at Nevada is going to be somewhat similar just from a geographical standpoint, because we did recruit LA really, really hard, as well as Northern California when we were at Nevada. So feel comfortable in that. And then there's the whole areas in the Midwest that maybe will be new to us as well.
Those unknowns that make it so exciting. Eric, we really appreciate the time. First chance to catch up with Coach Musselman. I'm sure it will be the first of many. Wish you the best of luck getting that roster, that staff, and, of course, getting your family settled in L.A.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate you having me on. Fight on.
Spring football all over the place this past Saturday. Now, remember, Iowa does not do an official spring game, but Kirk Ferentz and the Hawkeyes did have their open practice. Most spring games are not 100% full speed. You can see there out in L.A. with USC. Illinois trying to stretch the field a little bit. A lot of holes to fill for Brett Bielema and company, more so on the defensive side this year than on the offensive side. And with that, welcome in Dave Wanstead, as promised, to discuss some of those spring storylines. And we went pretty deep with Sam Webb on Michigan, but you can never talk too much about the defending national champions and the three-time defending Big Ten champs, even with all the stars that are gone from last year's team.
No, I agree. Sam did a great job, really, on some of the, little points that get missed. The one thing that jumped at me, we talked about Sharon Moore getting the head coaching job. And this was a great opportunity for Ward Manuel, one, to evaluate live a future head coach. And it was a great job, obviously, for Coach Moore as an audition.
6 games, basically.
6 games. And you say, well, couldn't he just look at the results? No. I guarantee you, Ward, and I know Ward from when he was at Connecticut and I was at Pitt, he had an opportunity not just put the game plan aside. They're going to have good game plans, but he got a chance to see how Coach Moore reacts with the assistant coaches. Is he in the offense? Is he in the defense? Does he really care about special teams? Is that important to him? This type of stuff. How do the players respond, not after the game, but how about leading up to the game in that meeting? How about at halftime? How did the coaches adjust at halftime, and how did they communicate? And the same thing for the players during the course of the game. So there was so much to evaluate there to make the final decision. So, I think it's a great decision, and it was not a knee-jerk reaction. This was one that I guarantee Ward took his time and really looked close at this.
And I know for a fact that if he went and spoke with the players, nearly every player would have gone into Ward Manuel's office and said, we want Sharon Moore, and we don't want there to be any other candidate. He is beloved by those players. Now he gets to take over, and it is tough to be the man after the man. Jim Harbaugh found a way to beat Ohio State multiple years with that Big Ten championship, the national title. Sharon now tries to do it first year as the permanent full-time head man in Ann Arbor. That's a slightly different case in Iowa City, where the head guy's been there a while, quarter century plus for Kirk Ferentz, just as the head coach, and many more years as the assistant. Dave, some folks thought after last season that could be it. They got back to the championship game. His son Brian wasn't retained as OC. My understanding is that Kirk never really considered it for more than maybe a day after he found out about the news regarding Brian. He just keeps on chugging, but this Iowa offense, it has to find something in this new look Big Ten.
Yeah, and I believe they will. And Kurt, I mean, had a fantastic year last year. You know, I mean, nobody picked him to do, obviously.
Coached his tail off.
Oh, please. And his son, under those circumstances, I mean, they were all in. It was a great example of just staying focused and taking care of your job. And they bring in Tim Lester. That's the real story there. You know that with old Coach Parker there running the defense, that they're going to be solid on defense. They always are. A top defense, not just in the Big Ten.
They might be better than they were last year.
Oh, I think they will be better than they were last year because of that front seven. They were a young team. 2 years ago, they had two number one guys get drafted in the first round. This year, I think Cooper Lejeune will. He'll be a top pick. But the nucleus of this defense is back. But the story is Tim Lester, and everybody says, who's Tim Lester? We know his career, Western Michigan, and then he's the head coach there. But if you look close, he's an ex-quarterback. He's done a great job of getting his quarterbacks to play at a high level. But you know what I looked at? First thing is he committed to the running game. I can't believe that Kirk Ferentz is going to hire anybody that tells him, oh, I believe in the running game. Kurt's going to go and he wants facts. And at Western Michigan, one time he had the running back that led all FBS in touchdowns. He had another running back that was all conference 2 years in a row, was an All-American running back.
Well, this is the misconception, right? Because
Yep.
Tim Lester leads a spread offense. People say, well, spread offense is just throwing the ball all over the place. When Ohio State won a national championship under Urban Meyer, that's a spread offense, and Ezekiel Elliott was pounding people with the rock in between the tackles. You can run spread and still be a tough running team.
And he's going to do it. I listened to an interview 2 days ago with Jay Higgins, the linebacker, and Jay made the comment. They asked him, "What's different in the spring?" And he says, "I'll tell you." He says, Coach Lester does a great job of misdirection. He says he'll have the linemen pulling one way to influence us and get us moving that way, but yet the ball's coming back the opposite way. And he talked about shifts and motions. These are type of things that I think that he can do to get the defense distracted, but yet now he's handing that ball off down the middle, and here we go. So it's going to be a change, obviously, but I trust Kirk Ferentz. I think every Iowa fan got to say, hey, this guy knows what he's doing. We're all in on Tim Lester and the type of style he's going to bring. We're not going to drop back and throw it 50 times.
Well, they also need Cade McNamara to stay healthy. There were just too many quarterback issues a year ago. Different quarterback story out in L.A. for USC and Lincoln Riley. You lose the ultimate quarterback in Caleb Williams, the presumed number one pick. Now, Miller Moss has talent. We saw it in the bowl game. We assume he's going to be the guy. And Dave, a bunch of young guys on the outside, but USC has speed to burn. Yeah, I talked to Matt Leinart yesterday, USC guy who does the college football for the Big Ten and Fox. And Matt made the comment, he says, the number one thing offense, really, when you look at their team, this year they brought in 5 stars, 6 guys transferred out. There just hasn't been that continuity year after year after year. That's the first thing that I know Lincoln Riley. Hey, you want to get all the best players you can, but if you got a young guy that's talented, I mean, that's what Nick Saban did. He would recruit players. They might not be the star or the starter, but they were going to be a great player, and he found a way to keep them. Tua, they're a great example, Tua. And so I think that Lincoln Riley is addressing that. The biggest storyline is the defense. And, they hired a new defensive coordinator, and not just a new defensive coordinator, they brought in 4 new defensive assistants. So it's a complete overhaul, and I don't know what happened. Alex Grinch was there. Alex Grinch coached with Urban Meyer, who's as tough as they come. He was at USC with Lincoln Riley. All of a sudden, how you lose your aggressiveness, but they were one of the worst, and this is hard to say. I coached at USC. I know the athletes are getting, and they missed as many tackles almost as any team that I saw play all last year. So the focus has been, we're going to start getting tougher in the weight room. We're going to keep our players that we got here, and we are going to play a much more aggressive defense and make plays on defense. I think the offense is going to be fine. Defense has got to help them. Let's come back to the Midwest and Illinois. It was a disappointment last year after a 2022 where I think Illinois certainly exceeded expectations. They did not get consistent quarterback play last year. Luke Altmaier is back, but they lose most of their talent on the outside. They lose a couple of starters up front offensively, and they lose two of the best defensive linemen in the nation last year in Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph.
Yeah, they I didn't feel like, 2 years ago when they had the great year, okay, Tommy DeVito, Chase Brown, Tommy DeVito threw 3 touchdowns to every 1 interception. Okay, last year, Luke came in here and they were almost 1 touchdown, 1 interception.
It's not going to get it done.
It's not going to get it done, particularly when you got a defensive-minded head coach in Brent Bielema who wants to run the ball. And they've got a nice group of backs coming back. Flanagan, they got McCray, they got Love. I mean, they got a nice group of running backs coming back. I think offensively, they've got to get back to where they were 2 years ago, where the quarterback, I'm not saying play conservative, but hey, play Brett Bielema ball. Run the ball, the play action pass, and don't put your defense in that position that they did last year. I think they'll improve. They've got to get back, though. That's got to be their DNA. That's got to be the blueprint for winning. If they try to do anything else, I don't feel good.
I mean, game manager is not necessarily a bad word. I don't know why people think that's a negative connotation on a quarterback. Look back to Brett's great teams at Wisconsin that continued to go to the Rose Bowl, led by guys like Scott Tolzien, who, by the way, is a quote-unquote game manager, not only won in buckets in college, but went on to have a lengthy NFL career. That'll get it done when you have a run game and a defense. That's certainly what Illinois hopes to get back to in 2024. Plenty of intrigue still out there as spring ball winds down, wanting on what to expect from the new-look Spartans, and how can David Braun outdo himself with the Cats? Those stories next on Big Ten Today. Jonathan Smith officially going through his first spring game as the Michigan State head coach. Offense beat the defense 31-24, though, as Dave well knows, you take the scores from spring games and you throw them in the trash. They mean nothing. You evaluate players individually, and there's a lot of evaluation to be done. Whole new group of quarterbacks, bunch of transfers out, transfers in, including Aiden Childs, who came with Jonathan Smith from Oregon State. It is a brand new slate, and that's good news for Michigan State because last year was a bit of a disaster, both on and off the field for this program. With Jonathan Smith, A.D. Allen Haller is hoping for stability and an exciting brand of football that we saw while he was in Corvallis doing a terrific job with Oregon State.
Absolutely. The competition out there and being able to recruit players to come to Corvallis, I've coached there. It's not easy. It's not an easy job.
Spent a month there 1 week?
I spent 24 hours there 1 week. But I, when I look at this Michigan State team, obviously you mentioned a new quarterback. Absolutely. Childs comes in, and they brought a new offensive coordinator in from South Dakota State. So there's going to be an instant continuity there between the quarterback and the coordinator. And he added a couple offensive linemen. So you got the whole group of running backs back. A pretty talented group, in my opinion, coming back from Michigan State. You got 3 of the 5 offensive linemen, where they picked up 1 from the portal. To me, when I look at this team, they lost 2 linebackers to the portal, 2 defensive linemen. That front 7 on defense. I mean, I know they got some good young talent. The portal's still alive right now. But to me, for Michigan State to really make a step forward, I think they will on offense, without a doubt.
Yeah, they're going to have to outscore people.
Yep, because I think defensively, particularly in that front 7 in the Big Ten, against the teams that like to run the ball, that's the group that I would be focused on, because they're going to have to come along, and they're going to have to come along in a hurry.
I agree with you. So the expectations in Michigan State, a little bit unknown right now because there are so many question marks. A team that exceeded everyone's expectations in 2023, Northwestern. David Braun maybe should have been National Coach of the Year with what he did with this program a year ago to get them to bowl eligibility after everything that went on before the year. Now the trick is doing it again in year 2.
Yeah, doing it again. And he got a fantastic year out of the quarterback, Ben Bryant, right? So now, to me, it sounds a little bit, just reading and hearing and talking to people, like they're kind of undecided at the quarterback. They got Helinski coming back.
Sully.
They got Sully coming back. You know, they've got to make a decision, in my point. You know, let's make a decision on quarterback and let's move forward, because they do have a good group of players coming back. They lost a couple guys that really disappointed me. One went to West Virginia, one went to Notre Dame. They lost some players in the portal. And Northwestern, it's very difficult for them just to go grab players.
Oh, it's almost impossible.
Because of some of the academic requirements. So they're a little bit handcuffed that way from the standpoint. We might lose a guy, but we can't go replace him like some of these other schools, not quite as quick. So, you know, David being there, having his feet on the ground, he knows this team now a lot better than he did a year ago. He knows the strengths of the players. You know, he knows the weaknesses of players. And, boy, just a phenomenal job. It's going to be tough to repeat. It's going to be tough to repeat, but I think they got good people, and the kids believe now that he's the head coach, and we're going to follow him.
I can't just win West Division games, though, now either. You have a divisionless Big Ten, the addition of those 4 other schools, a pretty tough schedule. If they even come close to matching what they did a year ago, it would be yet another feather in David Braun's cap. It's a very young cap, but it's awfully impressive after that first year in Evanston. All right, time for one final break here on Big Ten. Today we're back with Dave's coaching perspective on the days leading up to the draft and what life inside an NFL team war room is actually like. It's time for your big stat, fueled by Gatorade. Look at the Big Ten in the NFL draft. 2 overall #1 selections since 2000, Courtney Brown and Jake Long. 60 offensive and 69 defensive players chosen in the first round over the past 24 years. No Big Ten school producing more first-round picks. No surprise in Ohio State with 40. League had 9 first-round picks in 2023. Dave, you've been through this process many times in a couple of different roles. So from the team's perspective, weeks and days leading up to the draft, which starts this Thursday night, what are the teams focused on right now?
Well, right now they're working the phones to see, they're going to call every team. Are you interested in trading down? Are you interested in trading up? There'll be some teams that say, no, we're going to sit right where we're at, and we are going to pick.
So you just cross them off your list?
You just cross them off the list. If a team says, I would be interested in moving down but not up, that team goes in that category. So they're putting that together at this time. And then they're working the bullpen. The boards are already set. And the way we always did it, we would have 2 boards. In other words, there'll be 256 players drafted this year in the draft over the 3 days. And we would have a 1 board by the best player in the draft. And just for conversation, let's say it's Marvin Harrison. Okay, he would be #1, regardless of position.
Just best player.
Best player, #1 all the way down to 256. Okay, so we'll probably put 300 players on the board. And then there'll be another board by position. And now we got Caleb Williams and J.J. McCarthy, however they rank the quarterbacks. And generally you say, well, what board is more important? And if you're a new head coach, a new general manager, you need the best players available. That's usually the way those teams go. If you are a team that feels they're close, or the coach and general manager are close to being fired, they're under a lot of pressure, they might shift to the best player, okay, by position. So I don't care the big board. Okay, Marvin Harrison's first, but we need a quarterback. The Bears are going to take a quarterback. When we had the first pick of the draft at Dallas, and it was the year leading up to the Super Bowl, we were short defensive linemen. Russell Maryland was not, a Chicago kid, was not the best player in that draft.
But you needed to fill that hole.
So we took Russell Maryland with the very first pick of the draft. So that was that type of scenario. So it varies. And then once we get the board set and we come to an agreement, you got scouts who have been following these kids for 2-3 years. They call them area scouts. So they're going repeatedly back to the school. They know the trainer. They know the weight coach. They know the assistant coaches. They are very familiar with these kids coming out. Then the coaches, they have an opinion. And I would assign, okay, go look at all the offensive linemen, to my line coach. And so you got an opinion from the coaches, you got an opinion from the scouts, then the general manager gets involved with the head coach, and we got to come up with a final grade on this kid.
And sometimes those grades have to be determined by either tape and or workout. So when you evaluate, right, you're looking at the film that you've seen from 3 or 4 years in college, but you also work out guys, especially first-round guys that you might draft. How do you decide what's more important in the draft?
You know, it's funny. Bill Parcells, and Bill Polian with quarterbacks. If the quarterback's not over 6'1", 6'2", Bill Polian, cross him off. Bill Parcells wanted his linemen a certain height, running backs a certain, where I've always done it differently. We were always going to look at production. If we could draft a linebacker, we took Dixon Edwards out of Michigan State a few years back. You know, we were at Dallas in the second round because he could run and he made 1,000 tackles. And we're sitting there watching the tape and saying, I don't know how big he is. I don't know how. We don't care. Right now, this guy makes tackles. We want this guy. So a lot of coaches, though, and general managers, they will stay with, we're not going to draft a 5'10" quarterback. We don't want Russell Maryland. He's not Drew Brees. He's not tall enough. We want those guys 6'2". So that factors in. And then lastly, which is a good story here, you know, we're going to put a grade on him. And then let's say the kid's a great player and he's got a good grade, but he's a character issue. We might put a little blue flag on that. Anybody that's got the blue flag, that's a red. That flashes on character. Injury type of guy would be red. We're at the Miami Dolphins, and my daughters both went to Indiana, so I'm down there visiting them on a bye week, and I'm watching Indiana football. And this defensive end is making plays. I start researching Wale Agunlie. God, he's in the top 10 or so and going to be drafted. Guess what? That game, he blows his knee out. I think it was against Ohio State. Now so we got to put a red tag on him. He would have been a second-round pick or higher, but now he's a red flag because he's on crutches. So I get down during the draft, and I see our owner, Mr. Huizinga, and I said, I'd like to sign Wale Agunlie. I says, now I'm telling you this as a free agent because he's going to walk down the hall, and first time you're going to see him, he's going to be on crutches. And he says, do what you got to do. So we signed Wale, and I says, all you're going to do is rehab and run and lift, and we paid him what the minimum is to do that. And he was in Miami all year, and he got healthy, and 3 years later, he's in the Pro Bowl.
The question that everybody wants to know, how many gallons of coffee are consumed on draft day in an NFL war room?
Well, it depends on the club. Some guys are coffee drinkers. When we were at Dallas, it was Heineken and nachos for Jimmy Johnson. So everybody's got their own flavor, Rick. You know, I don't know. I was a little bit of the coffee, though.
Heineken and nachos on draft day. And yet somehow that organization picked enough guys to win Super Bowl after Super Bowl.
Yes, that's exactly right. But there is a lot to it, and these scouts have been working on these things for years. But you got to come to a happy agreement. You got to draft somebody.
Officially, the show is known as Big Ten Today. We like to call it Story Time with Wani because it is much more entertaining in that way. For Dave, I'm Rick. As always, we appreciate you hanging with us on Big Ten Today, and we'll do it again on Tuesday.